Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Today, the table is set. We're gonna have a Thanksgiving themed dinner with some friends. So we are gonna be making focaccia, which is actually on the table already, with sweet potato salad. Then we're gonna have a turkey, mashed potatoes, creamy, garlicky mashed potatoes, Brussels sprouts, and for dessert we're gonna have a twist on a pumpkin pie, and I made a non-alcoholic sangria. So let me bring you back to this morning when I started making all this, and we'll get to enjoy all of the delicious food soon. So the first thing I'm going to start off with is with roasting the garlic for our mashed potatoes. Now I am doubling the recipe, so I'm going to do 2 heads of garlic. I'm going to cut up the top, place it on a foil, drizzle it with olive oil, salt, and pepper to taste. And then this is going to go into a 400-degree oven for an hour. Now, when I'm doing this, I'm not even ready for the day, but I figured because it needs an hour, it gives me plenty of time to do things, get myself ready while this is roasting. Like that, once I'm in the kitchen, this is not taking up time that I could be using the oven for different things. Once I am ready for the day, I'm going to start off with our double crumble pumpkin pie. And I'm going to start by making our crumble crust. So for that, I'm going to add some flour along with some coconut oil, or you can use a stick of margarine. And then I'm going to add some sugar, some dark brown sugar, and some salt. Then I'm just going to, with my fingers, mix it all together until it resembles the consistency of a wet sand. Once I've reached that point, I will then press half of this crumb mixture into a pan. So you want a deep 9-inch square pan. Preferably you would use a Pyrex or a dark metal one, which I don't have, so I use a disposable one. And you're just going to press the crumbs down and up the edges about 1.5 inches up the sides. Once we have that set and set aside, the extra crumbs are set aside and the pan is set aside, then we can start on the pumpkin filling. So I pulled out my food processor for this, and we're going to add, so the recipe does call for a sugar pumpkin that you roast and cool and scoop out the insides. Or it says you can use 2 cups of canned pumpkin. I used 1 full can, which is just slightly less than 2 cups, and I'm okay with that because I was going to open another can to complete that 2nd cup. Then we're going to use 1 cup of canned coconut milk or Power of Whip. So the recipe does say that you can use Power of Whip, which if I were to try this again, I would probably try it like that because it had too much of a coconut flavor for me between the coconut oil and the crumbs and the coconut milk. It was a little bit too much for me. But I did use the 1 cup of canned coconut milk for this recipe at this time. Then I add 3 eggs, 2/3 cup of sugar, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, and some nutmeg. And we're going to blend it up until it's nice and smooth, and then we can pour that over the crust and then sprinkle the remaining crumbs over the filling. And this will then bake in a 350-degree oven for 45 minutes to 1 hour. I believe that I did end up baking it closer to an hour because I wanted to make sure that it is not too jiggly in the center. It does say that it should still be jiggly in the middle, but I didn't want it to be too jiggly. And you want this to cool completely before you slice into it. So that is why this is one of the things that I'm making first thing in the morning. The next thing we'll be making is the focaccia bread. So for this, although it's not a complicated process with the recipe that I'm following, it is time consuming. So, because you have to let it rise. So this is another thing that I'll be working on earlier in the day. Now I'm starting off with 1 3/4 cup of warm water. And you want the water between 105 and 115. So I'm checking the temperature of the water and it is perfect. So I'm going to add in some sugar. The recipe does call for cane sugar. I just use regular white sugar. And some dry yeast. So I'm adding that in. And I'm going to stir it a little bit. And then let it sit for 5 minutes until the yeast is foamy. The recipe does say that if the yeast doesn't foam, you should discard it and start again with some fresh yeast. After 5 minutes, we're going to add in some flour and sea salt, and we're going to mix it on a low speed until a shaggy dough forms. And then you're going to increase the speed to medium and mix for 5 minutes. You're going to have a very elastic, sticky dough because this focaccia is a very wet dough. This is what makes it such a unique type of bread. So it's going to be sticky, and don't be afraid of that. It should be grabbing onto the sides of the bowl as it's mixing. That's when you know that it's ready. After the 5 minutes, you're going to take a large bowl and you're going to brush it with some olive oil. And we're going to transfer the dough to the bowl. And the best way to do this is to use a spatula and scrape it out of the bowl of the mixer. It will be very sticky to transfer by hand. Once you have it in the bowl, you're going to use your fingers to lightly brush any oil that's pooling at the edges and cover the top of the dough with it. Then I'm going to cover it with a plastic wrap and a towel, and we're going to set it aside until the dough has doubled in size, which this should take between an hour and a half. I believe for me it did take an hour because I had the oven going ready for a few hours in my kitchen, so it was nice and warm in there, so it took just the 1 hour to reach that point. At this point, I'm still waiting for our pumpkin pie to come out of the oven before I can put the next thing in. So I'm going to work on the dressing for our sweet potato salad because this doesn't need any equipment and it could just get done and be set aside for later. So I'm starting off with some olive oil. I'm going to add some balsamic vinegar, honey, and Italian seasoning. I do not have Italian seasoning, so I'm just mixing some herbs that I have, which is mostly actually from my garden. And I did thyme, oregano, basil, and parsley. We're just going to mix it together and then cover it and set it in the fridge for later. Now our pumpkin pie is coming out, and you can see it still has a little bit of that jiggle to it. Our focaccia dough is now ready for the next step. So I'm going to take out a 9 by 13 inch baking dish. I'm using over here a ceramic one. And I'm going to spread 2 tablespoons of oil on the bottom of it. Then I'm going to uncover the dough, rub my hands with some olive oil, and then I am going to take the sides. I'm going to slide my hand under the dough and bring it up until it, like around the entire dough, until it forms a nice ball, which I can then lift and put into the baking dish. Once it is in the dish, I am going to stretch it out, try to get it to the edges, let it relax a little bit, and then do that same thing again. Stretch it until it goes to the edges. Then we're going to cover it again and let it rest for another 45 minutes. At the 30-minute mark, we're going to preheat the oven to 425 so that once it reaches the 45 minutes, our oven will be ready for us. Now, while I have a minute, I ran out to the garden and I'm going to harvest some rosemary that we'll be able to chop up and sprinkle on top of the focaccia. Okay, so I guess I wasn't doing anything to show you while things were happening over here, like the dough was rising. So we're coming back to the focaccia again. I am going to chop up the rosemary that we just harvested together. And then I'm going to remove the plastic wrap off of the focaccia. I'm going to drizzle a little bit more olive oil over the top. Rub the olive oil all the way around. And with your fingers, I'm going to make indentations across the entire surface of the dough, pressing it all the way down to the pan. Then I'm going to sprinkle the rosemary and some flaky sea salt on the top, and you don't have to do this, but you can use just salt, you can do just rosemary, or you can use whatever other toppings you would want. And this bakes for 20 to 30 minutes or until golden brown. Now I forgot that I wanted to make the sangria, so at this point I still had enough time to make it and have it chill in the fridge for the required amount of time, which is 4 to 6 hours. So I am going to go ahead and make this. So first thing I'm doing is I'm getting a lemon, a lime, an orange, and an apple. I washed the skins off very well, and then I'm slicing it. I'm leaving all the peels on, and for the apples, I'm gonna core them. So I don't have a corer, so as you can see, I am cutting it out with my knife. Once I have all this cut up, I am getting it into the jar, and I am going to add the juices. Now you'll see me do this in 2 batches because I realized that once it was completed, because at the end, right before serving, we're going to add some seltzer to it. I realized that once I add the seltzer, it's not going to be full, and I like when the pitcher is full when I start off a party. So I am 1.5. I'm doing 1.5 times the liquid, the juices. So I am adding grape juice, apple juice, orange juice, lemon juice. We're gonna mix it and then set it in the fridge. And right before serving, like I said, we're gonna add the seltzer. The next thing we're gonna do is roast the vegetables for our sweet potato salad. So for this, we need 2 sweet potatoes, peeled and cut into small cubes, and a red onion, half and sliced. Once I have all these vegetables prepped and ready, I am going to drizzle it with some olive oil, kosher salt, and black pepper on a lined parchment cookie sheet, and this will bake on 425 for 50 minutes. And this was perfect timing because as our focaccia was coming out of the 425 oven, this was ready to go in and roast up. Now, once our vegetables are coming out of the oven, we can lower the oven temperature to 350 and start working on our turkey. 2 things to note here is that the recipe calls for a turkey roast. I used a London broil because my grocery only had a pickled turkey roast and I didn't want to use that. Second thing is it says to use a 3-pound turkey roast. The smallest turkey that I was able to find was 4.5 pounds. So I am adjusting the spice rub to match the pounds that I have. So for the spice mix, I am mixing maple syrup, honey, mustard, paprika, onion powder, garlic powder, salt, and black pepper in a bowl. Once that is done, I'm getting my turkey into the pan. I'm rubbing some oil over the top and sides of the turkey, and then I'm spreading the marinade over the top and sides of the turkey as well. Then it says to add an inch of water into the bottom of the pan, and then roast the turkey uncovered for 1 to 1.5 hours, basting every 30 minutes, which I didn't do, and you'll see why in a minute. And it says to add more water to the pan if necessary. So yeah, I adjusted the bake time as well because I had a bigger turkey. I have a full transparency moment for you guys. So this is, I'm gonna give you a look of my kitchen because as the turkey was in the oven, my oven broke and it didn't cook at all. So I got it into a neighbor's oven, and it's gonna be ready in a few minutes. I had an errand to run, and this is what my kitchen is looking now when I came back in. Okay, I have dishes, not even all from today. Today I didn't make such a big mess, but yeah. My oven is pulled out. Can you even tell? It's been pulled out. Stuff all over on the floor. And this counter over here is not any better either. But the good thing is the table is set for tonight. So I'm gonna go back in the kitchen now. And until the turkey is ready to be taken out from my neighbor's oven, I'm gonna clean this up so that we can continue and finish over the last few things. Luckily, the turkey was the last thing that had to go in the oven. Everything else is baked. but the stovetop does work, so we can finish the rest of the cooking, which will be mashed potatoes, Brussels sprouts, and the gravy. So let's get to this, and I'll see you guys once this is all cleaned up and we're ready to continue cooking. 50 minutes later, my counter space is looking so much better. I managed to wash a lot of dishes, and I can think again about making more, and I've got the turkey back from my neighbor. Now that it's closer to actual dinner time, we're gonna get going with our mashed potatoes because this will take some time to come to a boil and then another at least 20 minutes to cook. So we're starting off with 3 pounds of Yukon Gold potatoes. I am doubling the recipe because of the amount of people that I'm feeding. I needed more than a single recipe. So you're going to peel the potatoes, and these were actually pretty small potatoes, so they were a little bit of a pain to peel. But I got through it. I did cut up the bigger pieces to be about the same size as all the smaller ones so that they cook at an even time. And I got into a pot, covered with water. I actually salted the water a little bit, and we're going to, like I said, bring it to a boil and then let it cook until fork tender. Once it is done, we're going to strain it and set it aside. Next up, we're going to work on our Brussels sprouts. So for this, I am going to take my bag of Brussels sprouts. I'm cutting off the bottom, taking off any outer leaves that don't look good, and cutting it in half and setting it aside. While I'm doing this, I'm also having my cast iron skillet heat up so that when I am ready to get the Brussels sprouts into the pan, they will sear up and get beautiful color on the bottom. Now that my skillet is nice and hot, I will add some oil to it, and I'm going to put the Brussels sprouts cut side down so that it can get a beautiful char on it. And I'm going to sprinkle salt and pepper on top, and I'm going to let it sit. I'm going to let it rest for 2, 3, even 5 minutes until it has a beautiful color, and then I'll start mixing it and flipping it over so that it can roast on the second side. And this is all it takes to have delicious Brussels sprouts. Now while I have the potatoes cooking and I'm letting the Brussels sprouts sit before I stir it, I have time to cut the turkey. So I'm cutting nice thick slices of them and I'm putting it on the tray. In hindsight, I probably should have waited and done it once my guests were there because it did dry out just a little bit before we were able to eat it. So I'll know if I make this again, a way to cut into it, like right when we're gonna eat. Now that our Brussels sprouts have beautiful color on both sides and they're nice vibrant green, they are done, and I'm going to transfer them into the serving bowl that they will be in. The last thing we need to cook is our gravy. Now, another full transparency moment. I made it first using the pan drippings, and it was too clumpy and it wasn't becoming a gravy. So I got rid of that. I cleaned out my pot, and I'm doing it again now using oil. So all I'm doing is heating up some oil, adding some flour, mixing it together, letting the flour cook off a little bit, and then I'm adding some white wine. I did not love the flavor that the white wine gave to it. I think next time I would do it using some chicken broth instead. So it has like a different flavor to it. Chicken broth or turkey broth or something like that. And we're going to let this cook down and let it simmer until the gravy thickens a little bit. And then I am transferring it over to a bowl that will go next to the turkey. Next, we're going to assemble the salad. So I'm putting down romaine lettuce, our roasted vegetables, our dressing, and then finishing off with some slivered almonds. Now that our potatoes are done cooking, I have them straining in my strainer. I am taking the same pot that I cooked the potatoes in and got to hit record, but I squeezed the roasted garlic out of the peel and into the pot. And I'm gonna add some chicken broth in there along with some nutritional yeast. I see here now that the recipe called for dill, and I didn't add it. I thought that it can use some greenery. Anyways, you add the chicken broth, you add the nutritional yeast. We're gonna simmer this over medium-high heat for 1 minute. Once that has cooked down, I'm gonna add the potatoes. I'm gonna mash it. Add, ooh, I missed this step. Salt, olive oil, and dill. I didn't add any of that. Wow. I think the flavor would have been so much better. Okay, I'm gonna have to try it again. Just try not to overmix and serve it hot. Once it's mashed, I'm transferring them into a bowl and getting it onto the table. I forgot to hit record, but I added seltzer to our sangria and I set it onto the stand. All the food is cooked, laid out on the table, candles are lit, we are ready to eat. So, focaccia, delicious. I can see myself making this over and over and over again. Was perfect, didn't take too long, and delicious flavor. The salad I've made in the past and we absolutely loved it. I'm gonna make it again. The turkey was not my favorite. I would probably make a different recipe that I've made in the past. The gravy, like I said, I would have changed. I made with chicken broth, mashed potatoes. I need to do it properly. Brussels sprouts was delicious. Was, I think, the hit of the meal. The sangria was also delicious. It was enjoyed by all. And the pumpkin pie was not what I expected. It could have been a lot better. Like I said, I would probably try it with a bit whip next time to avoid all that overwhelming coconut flavor because I don't like that. And that's it for today's video. So if you enjoyed this video, I hope you will hit subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.